Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were Lifejacked.
What do you do when you learn that your child has autism? My name is Dr. Rowe, and this is Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast. Lifejacked is when an unfortunate or unplanned event happens to jack with your life. My guest for this week, Randi-Lee Bowslaugh, was born and raised in Ontario, Canada, and from a young age, she had a passion for helping others. She attended Niagara College and graduated at the top of her class from Community and Justice Services after completing her placement at a recovery house for alcohol and drug addiction. Post-graduation, she worked at a Native Friendship Center for 2.5 years while pursuing a university education in psychology. Randi-Lee continued working in social services for another 4 years as an employment counselor until she left to pursue her other passions. She is the author of 10 books, ranging from topics on mental health to parenting. She will share how she navigated through her son's autism diagnosis to be the ultimate mom for him. Her resilience journey serves as an inspiration to all mothers, especially those living with neurodivergent children. Hi, Randi. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Hi, I am good. I'm super excited to be able to be on your show.
Yes, I am so lucky and fortunate to have you as well, which brings me to my first question, when I was doing research about you, and I found out you are a national Canadian kickboxing champion. Like, whoa. Like, I think that is so cool. How did you get into kickboxing?
It's actually a really hilarious story that involves my kid. So when he was about 5, he's now 17. So when he was 5, we put him into jiu-jitsu. So he's going to his class, he's doing his little thing, and off on another area of the gym, there was a cardio kickboxing class going on. And I said to my husband, I said, those ladies have really nice butts. I want to have a really nice butt. So I joined the class. Turns out that they were runners, and that's where they got the butt from. But I ended up loving the class. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do the regular kickboxing class again instead of just the cardio. Absolutely loved that. And I mean, the rest is history.
Wow, that is amazing. And yeah, who doesn't want to have a nice butt, right?
Right, exactly.
Now I want to switch gears a little bit. And so your life changed tremendously during your teenage years after your mother got remarried. Can you please share this experience with the listeners?
Yeah. So between grade 8 and grade 9 in the summer there, my mom got married, and he seemed like an all right guy. And then as time progressed, he started drinking more and more, and so he was an alcoholic. And so there would be days that I wouldn't even know what was going to happen. If I would go home from school and he would be the nice guy, or if I would go home from school and he would just be yelling and breaking stuff. So it was really difficult time to be a teenager. I mean, you got hormones and everything's changing to begin with, and then I don't feel safe at home. And during that time as well, my brother, he was in and out of jail and he was doing drugs. And so my mom was trying to kind of manage all of us, and it didn't it didn't really work well. It took me a lot of therapy to realize that she did the best she could, but it was just really hard to try and navigate an alcoholic stepfather and then a brother who was in and out of jail.
Wow, I can imagine that is a lot, especially as a teenager, right? You're trying to navigate life and try to figure things out on your own about yourself, right? Let alone trying to go home and you don't know what mood that your stepfather is in. And sometimes it's hard because you don't have any type of biological connection to this person, right? So I can imagine that it's like, how do I connect with this person? You know, that they're not exactly I'm not an extension of them, you know, and just trying to connect. And you don't really know who you're going to find when you come home. Wow. So what helped you heal the hurt you had from that experience within your childhood?
So I did mention briefly therapy was a big one, but that definitely didn't come until much later. The first thing that kind of was helping me at the time get through it was actually writing. And I used to write a lot of poems to help me deal with the emotions that I was experiencing and the fact that I was having suicidal ideation at the time. And those poems actually became my first book when I decided to publish a book. It came in handy, I guess. But later on, when I did finally have the nerve to go to therapy, it wasn't until I went to therapy the first time in my 20s, but more recently, it was last year, 2 years ago, something like that. So in my 30s, I actually went and talked about that stuff specifically, and it was the best thing that I could have done because it turns out I had PTSD from it all, and working through a specific therapy related to trauma helped me to forgive my mom and see things a little bit from her side, putting blame properly where it should have gone, and identifying emotions that I had completely buried.
Well, that's huge that you were able to find a way to forgive your mother, because I could imagine going through that experience caused you a great deal of pain, and you probably wanted to blame, you know, anybody who you could, right? So, wow, kudos to you.
Yeah, I put a lot of blame on her. I was always a mommy's girl too, so it really felt like she was disregarding me all of a sudden, even though we were so close for growing up. But even after her, even though I did blame her for a lot of things, I still was always a mama's girl with her. But our relationship is much better now that I've worked through more of those issues.
I love to hear that. Now, you have a son who was diagnosed with autism, and many of my listeners know that if they've been listening on one of my previous shows and listening to me for a while, they also know that I have a son who was diagnosed with autism when he was 7. And I can remember the immediate feeling I had when I received my oldest son's diagnosis. I mean, a flood of tears of what in the world. You know, I just had so many questions. I felt disappointed in God, pretty much. But that was me. What was your initial thought or feeling after learning his diagnosis?
I was actually relieved to finally have answers. I had resigned myself to the fact that there was something wrong. So he was 8 by the time we got the diagnosis, and the school system was making him out to be a bad kid, and they weren't helping. And so to finally have that diagnosis, it was almost like, it's going to sound horrible, but it was like, haha, I told you something was wrong, right? And like I could throw it in their face because they didn't want to believe me when I said, no, he's not a bad kid. There's something going on. There's something else here. And so when we got the diagnosis, I was like, okay, awesome. I know what's happening. But then there was that whole, I need more information. I have no idea where we're going from here. I'm glad I can tell the school that they're wrong, but what do I do now? How do we navigate
this? No, absolutely. I understand that. It's that feeling of, the relief. 'Cause I'm pretty sure, just like I did, I knew something wasn't quite right. I just didn't know what it was. And I don't want to say something wasn't quite right. I don't want to say that, right? Because our children are wonderful and our sons are wonderful. But we just knew something was different, right? And
Yeah.
so what were the signs? So just in case there's a listener out there that is perhaps, curious about their own child and wondering, is there a possibility that my son or daughter could be autistic? So what were any signs or indications that led you to believe that he possibly could be on the spectrum?
Yeah, so the smaller things, I'll build up to the big one. So the smaller things were, he used to do this thing before he would go to bed. And it was basically like, picture child's pose in yoga and then rocking back and forth. So it was this repetitive movement. And then he would also always stretch out his fingers and bring them in and stretch them out and bring them in. So very different stimming things he would do all the time. He'd also get completely fixated on one thing, and that would completely dominate a conversation with him. And if I went to play toys with him, I had to play it the way he wanted me to do it, not the way that I could just do it. No, we had to follow a structured routine of what these characters were going to do. And then finally, it really became apparent that something was different because the older a kid gets, the more they should be interacting with peers of their own age. Whereas my kid was more, I'm cool playing all by myself, kind of near you, and I'll pretend like that means that I'm playing with you, but really I'm doing my own thing, which is called parallel playing. And that's not something that is typical for an older elementary kid. That's much more typical in like a toddler. And so that was one of the really big defining moments when I got to talk to the doctor, and they're like, oh, okay, let's explore that more. Because of that social aspect, they were finally leading away from all the other diagnoses that they had given him. They had given him ADHD, sensory processing disorder, mood dysregulation disorder, like all of these different things that really all just came down to autism. They just needed to have that social piece in there first.
How did your life change for your family after learning his diagnosis? What adjustments did y'all have to make?
So we definitely had to make adjustments to get him to and from therapies. At that time, I was already being called away from work frequently. So he would have violent meltdowns at school, and so we would be called to go pick him up. And so eventually we decided that I would take time off of work, and we actually did a little bit of homeschooling and just tried some different things with the schoolwork, different classrooms. It was a lot of trying to figure out what would work. But that would probably be the biggest adjustment, was just figuring out, okay, how are we going to get him to all the things that he needs to do if we're both working full time? Something's got to give at some point. And I think the other biggest thing that changed was just our perspective of his attitude, because it was no longer, okay, you're throwing a temper tantrum, just stop. It was, okay, wait a minute, we've already been to 2 stores, you can't handle going to a 3rd store, that's why you're getting upset. So it was helpful to be able to change our mindsets, but it was definitely a big adjustment to do so.
Yeah, I love that you guys were willing to make the adjustments for your son, which, for some people it's like, of course I would, right? That's my child. But for some people it's very difficult to recognize that when you do have a child that is on the spectrum, it does change your life. You do have to adjust yourself. You do have to do things differently. I love going to amusement parks, and I had to learn that I can't, even though I would go there and I would take kids there, like to SeaWorld or to Fiesta, Texas, down in San Antonio, Texas, and all these Six Flags parks or whatever, and I would want to stay because I'm like, we bought this ticket, it's expensive, we're going to make the most of it all day long. And then it would just be a disaster because it was like so overstimulating for him. And yeah, by the end of the night, I mean, we're melting down, and it is everything imaginable that could go wrong was happening. And so you do have to adjust your life, very much so. So I do have to ask, just to give mom hope out there, So you got the diagnosis at 8, and now your son is 17. How is he now?
Oh my goodness, amazing. He now has his driver's license. He is accepted into the baking program at college. So he'll be going there in September. He's going to graduate from high school this year. He pretty much gets all A's. And it's definitely been a very long journey, but he is doing amazing. Again, a lot of adjustments. So just to give an example of, because we were talking about adjustments, is he does all his schoolwork online, which thanks to COVID, we were able to prove that that worked better for him. Pre-COVID, the teachers were all, no, you have to be in class, you have to be in class. But that was one of the triggers for him, was being in class. And so when COVID hit, and since I'm in Canada, we were closed down for a very long time. So he was able to do so much work at home and really prove to the teachers that he was very capable of doing the work, very smart kid. And so we were able to carry that through the rest of his high school. I'll admit I'm scared for college because he's going to baking, which means he has to physically be there. There is no way around that. So we'll cross that bridge as we get there. The fact that he wants to go, he is excited. We took a tour of the campus. That's a win in and of itself. So we will cross that other bridge when we get there. But it's making adjustments, finding what works best for your kid, and really pushing for it.
I love it. I love it. Well, kudos to him. That is so amazing to hear, how he has adjusted and that he is excited about going to baking school. He is driving, has a driver's license. That is huge. That is amazing. That is just, what, hats off to you, Mom, and your husband. Y'all are rock star parents for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, 7 years ago, I never would have thought that would be possible.
So yes, moms out there, if you are in the beginning stages of just finding out that your son or daughter has autism, we're two mamas here to tell you that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. For sure. Now, what's interesting is that you yourself has now learned that you are on the autism spectrum. So what impact has this had on your life?
Everything makes sense now. To put it simply, everything makes sense. So growing up, I always felt different. Different is such the perfect word to describe it all, because I really wouldn't know how else to describe it. It would be like somebody telling a joke and you're like laughing, but you've got no idea why. You just want to fit in. And so I would just be laughing because I wanted to fit in, but I would have no idea what was happening or why we were doing it. So it's just one small example of kind of why I felt different. I think it's that's an easy example. So when I finally got my own diagnosis, I was like, oh my goodness, it makes so much sense why, these things happen. Or, at my grandmother's funeral and everyone's crying and I'm sad. Don't get me wrong, I'm sad, but I'm not crying my eyes out like everyone else that's there. Like I was just like, hey, this is life, like it happens. So just different things like that really help to understand myself and understand how I process things. And then by doing that, I'm able to make situations easier for myself. So right now I'm playing with some magic stand stuff so I can stay focused on our conversation.
There's this term, neurodivergent, and this is a person on the autism spectrum, or more generally just describes someone whose brain processes information in a way that is not typical of most individuals, right? What is one misconception you would like to break for people about neurodivergent persons?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So I think that sometimes people think that those who are neurodivergent, so those oftentimes we're thinking people with autism, people with ADHD, learning disabilities, lots of different things. Oftentimes, if you don't know about them or you don't know somebody with it, you think that they're not very smart because their brain is thinking differently. But that doesn't mean that we're not really smart. I mean, I graduated from college at the very top of my class. My kid is pulling straight A's right now. So I think that one of the biggest misconceptions would be just that we aren't as intelligent as typical people.
I love that. Now, you write social stories. Can you please tell the listeners what a social story is and what is the benefit of a social story?
So it's a really good way to teach somebody how to do something specific. So I've written a couple of them, and so to give an example, one of them is about going to the bathroom. And that one, I wish I had those stories when my kid was younger. That's why I wrote them. So like, hey, somebody else might need these. And I thought about the struggle that he had with going to the bathroom. And I went, okay, so what are the step-by-steps? And it's literally, and it's all just drawn pictures with it, like cartoony pictures, so it's fun for kids. But it's like, turn the light on, shut the door, pull your pants down, sit on the toilet, wait till you're finished, right? Literally step-by-step, things that I think we often take for granted that you'll just know how to do, whereas it's not that obvious to shut the door when you go to the bathroom. It's not always that obvious that you have to flush right afterwards. Like things like that we often take for granted. So the social stories are a nice way to really show, it's usually kids, but to really show the kids, what to do and how to do it.
That's really neat. Yes, I use lots of social stories with my son, and actually my other two children, they are not on the spectrum, but I find that it has been very helpful and useful to use them, even with them, in teaching just basic generic life skills, right? Because we do have assumptions, like, we think that it's obvious on how to brush your teeth. You just get the toothbrush and put the toothpaste, but there are so many, extra steps in there that are necessary that go along with brushing your teeth that you don't even think about it. But with our kids, doing those social stories are very beneficial. And then also, I know some of your books, just about social situations, right, that they may encounter because there's just so much apprehension in them at times. So what are some of your, let me ask this, out of all of your books, which was the most fulfilling to write?
That is so tricky because of the different genres that I do write. But the one that comes to mind is actually one of my kids' books, and it's called Diamond the Cat. Yeah.
So why that one in particular?
So that one because, Diamond the cat, she was my real life cat. There's actually on the end page, I put a collage of real life pictures of her. She was the cat I had for 19 years. She had been with me through everything. I had her during the time that my stepfather was in my life. I had her when I had my baby. She was with me when I was suicidal. She was with me when I found out I had autism. She was with me through everything. So I wanted to make sure to basically keep her alive in the spirit of things. And so that book just, and it's so simple. It's all rhyming and it's just completely simplistic. But because I know how special she was, it really meant a lot to me when I did that book. And I drew the pictures for that one. And I cartoonerized her and all of the markings and everything on her exactly the way that she was. Because, a diamond is a girl's best friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Well, we have a cat as well. I never thought I would be a cat person, but we have a cat. But to be honest, she has been the best pet my kids could ever have, right? She's very loving and she's calm, unlike a dog. So
yeah,
that's been great. But especially for my son, my oldest, the one that is neurodivergent, it has really given him a sense of responsibility that he gets to take care of something. And so cats are special in that way. So I can totally understand how, telling that story would mean a lot for you.
Yeah, she was a special kind of kitty. Actually, my kid, I got him to draw a picture, so he's an artist as well. And I got him to draw a picture that I got tattooed of her on me.
Oh, that's really neat. Now, In your opinion, what are the best ways to build resilience?
That is so hard. So honestly, the best things that I've learned about that all came from therapy. So I would say the best ways to build it is really to go to therapy because that's what they get paid the big bucks for, is to help us. But resiliency, it really comes down to, I feel like it comes down to keep going. This is hard, keep going. This sucks, keep going. And so it can be very hard to build that resiliency. I think in kids, we can build it by letting them lose sometimes, right? With like a board game and letting them lose every once in a while to build up that idea that you don't always win in life. You don't always get what you want in life. That's a building block of resiliency that as an adult, we then have to go, okay, I just lost my job. Now what? I need to keep going. What can I do? And so the building resiliency starts at a young age and continues on into adulthood.
Wow, I love it. Just keep going. Just keep going. And you are so right. Randi-Lee, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. Please take the time to let everyone know how they can get copies of your books or book you as a speaker.
Yeah, so all of my books, they are available on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and you type in my name, Randi-Lee Bowslaugh, you'll be able to find all of my books, ranging from the kids' books, the social stories, the nonfiction, lots of things. And then if you did want to book me as a speaker, you can actually go through my publicist. I'm with Creative Edge. His name is Mickey. He's super awesome. He's the one that hooked me up here, I believe. And so he's awesome about making sure to get great guests for your shows, for your engagements.
Most definitely. Any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
Yes. So, things sometimes seem way more difficult than they are once we break them down. So if if you're just finding out that your kid has been diagnosed with some kind of neurodivergency, whether it be autism or ADHD, or even if it's something else, it can be very overwhelming at first to be like, wow, what do I do? Because there's just so much. But once you start breaking it down into bite-sized steps, like, okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the doctor. The next thing I'm going to do is do some research for 15 minutes. The next thing I'm going to do is talk to the school, right? Breaking it down into bite-sized steps is going to help you manage this huge shift that's about to happen in your life with this news.
Well, Randi-Lee, thank you so much. I wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Congratulations to your son. I wish him the best of luck this fall when he starts baking school. And you keep being the wonderful mother that you are. Please take care.
You've reached the end of another episode of Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast. Connect with me at www.lifejackedpodcast.com. Don't forget to sign up to the blog so you won't miss any events or episodes. And every now and then, I'll give away free materials from my guests or from me. Remember to live, laugh, love, learn, and then repeat. See you in the next episode.